Eliza had always known her worth in the cold, hard terms her parents dictated, a daughter whose only value was tied to the ability to bear children, and in that measure, she had failed. She remembered the day her father, face set in grim determination, and her mother, whose eyes once held warmth, but now only disappointment, told her that she was no longer needed at home, that she would be sold to the highest bidder among the local landowners. Her heart had shattered silently in that moment, yet she had learned long ago that tears were dangerous, that weakness invited cruelty. So she packed the little she owned into a worn satchel, trying to ignore the fire of humiliation that burned her cheeks, each thump a reminder that she had no family, no safety, no claim to kindness in a world that measured women by fertility. When she arrived at the estate, she was greeted not with compassion, but with cold calculation, a brief exchange of coins between her father and a stranger, who looked at her with eyes that promised neither friendship nor mercy. She became a ghost in that grand, lonely house, performing tasks with mechanical precision, her body and spirit both treated as property other than human. Days blurred into weeks, each sunrise bringing the same oppressive weight. She longed for freedom, for a place where she could exist without shame or barter, but such places were myths whispered by the lucky or the foolish. One late evening, while carrying firewood to the kitchen, she overheard a conversation between two servants that made her pulse quicken with a fragile hope. A man, rumors suggested he was kind, that he provided for his children with tireless devotion, and that he had a heart capable of understanding pain. Eliza clutched the rough wooden handle of the broom, feeling for the first time in months a spark of possibility, imagining a life where she could be valued for herself, not her ability to fulfill another's expectations. That night, she lay on the hard pallet that served as her bed, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the old mansion, her mind painting pictures of small, warm rooms, the smell of pine and smoke, and the laughter of children echoing through the air. She did not know if the journey would be safe, if the man she had heard of would welcome her, or if she would even survive the long, treacherous path through forests and hills. But something deep in her stirred a stubborn refusal to live as property. She packed only what she could carry, hiding a few coins she had managed to save from her forced labor, and at dawn, she slipped away from the estate, the towering silhouette of the mansion fading behind her as she stepped onto the dirt road, her heart pounding with a combination of fear and exhilaration. The journey was harsher than she imagined. Rain soaked her thin dress, mud clung to her feet, yet with each step she felt lighter, as though leaving her past behind allowed some small part of her to breathe for the first time in years. After days of walking and sleeping under the scant cover of trees, surviving on berries and the occasional wild root, she finally spotted smoke rising in the distance. Her heart leapt. She followed it, stumbling into a small clearing where a modest cabin stood, its chimney exhaling curling threads of warmth into the crisp morning air, chasing each other and laughing in a way that sounded like music. After so many months of silence and sorrow, a man, tall and broad-shouldered. Eliza froze, unsure how to approach, yet something in his demeanor invited trust rather than suspicion. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward, her voice trembling yet clear as she called out. He turned, and their eyes met. There was a brief pause, a silent sizing up, and then he smiled, not a polite, superficial smile, but one that carried a weight of understanding and loneliness that matched her own. She told him her story in broken, halting sentences, expecting disbelief, anger, or rejection, yet he listened without interruption, nodding as though he understood each word, each wound she carried, even those unspoken. When she finished, she braced herself for dismissal, for the return to rejection that had defined her life. But instead, he said softly, almost in wonder, "You'll stay, then, with us. We can help each other." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time, she did not hide them. She nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by a sense of relief she had thought impossible. That night, she lay in a small bed prepared for her, listening to the gentle breathing of children in the next room, feeling a sense of safety and belonging she had never known. Over the following weeks, life at the cabin unfolded in ways she could never have imagined. The lumberjack, whose name she learned was Thomas, involved her in caring for the children, teaching them, and managing the small garden that sustained them. She discovered in herself a strength and resilience that had been buried under years of shame and oppression. Drawn by her quiet patience, her laughter that rang like chimes in the morning, and the way she noticed every scraped knee or forgotten chore, Thomas and Eliza, the kind that slowly mends broken hearts. Nights were filled with conversations around the fire, where stories of loss, hope, and dreams for the future were shared in whispers so that the wind could not carry them away. She began to feel, not as someone purchased and discarded, but as a part of a family, a person who mattered, whose presence brought joy and comfort, replaced by love, laughter, and though she did not yet know what the future held, she carried in her heart a quiet certainty that she had found a place where she was truly home. The rain had turned to snow by the time Clara reached the cabin. The road behind her, muddy, dark, and filled with regret, seemed to vanish into the mist as though the world had already decided to forget her. The lumberjack, whose name she had learned was Eli Turner, walked ahead in silence, his shoulders broad. He didn't look back even once, though Clara could sense he was aware of her every hesitant step. When they reached the small clearing, the sight before her felt both strange and comforting. The cabin stood humble and strong amidst the towering pines, smoke curling softly from the chimney. In the dim light of dusk, it looked like something out of a dream stitched with both peace and sorrow. 4 small faces peeked through the window, children. Their laughter echoed faintly when Eli opened the door, and little Lily, the moment the children saw Clara standing in the doorway, their smiles faded. Clara lowered her eyes, feeling smaller than she ever had. The warmth of the cabin, the scent of stew, the crackle of the fire couldn't hide the tension that rippled through the room. Eli gestured toward the fire. "Sit," he said simply. His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Clara obeyed. Her clothes were damp, her fingers numb. She held them close to the fire, watching as steam lifted from her sleeves. The youngest child, Lily, no older than 5, came closer, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. "Is she gonna stay, Pa?" she asked softly. Eli hesitated. His jaw tightened as if the question itself hurt. "For now," he said. Clara looked up at him, tired, lost, trying to understand the kind of man who would buy a stranger. That night, Clara slept in the small room beside the kitchen. The walls were rough wood, and the cold seeped through the cracks like ghosts whispering of what she'd lost. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, stern, unmoved, his hand clutching the envelope that had ended her life as she knew it. She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering to herself that maybe, just maybe, she could start over here. Maybe Eli wasn't as heartless as he appeared. Days turned into weeks, and Clara slowly found her rhythm in the cabin. The forest, once foreign and frightening, began to speak to her. She learned to tell the time by the way light filtered through the branches. The children started to warm up to her, especially Lily, who followed her everywhere, holding her apron like it was a lifeline. But Eli remained distant. His eyes carried the weight of years' grief and guilt, buried so deep that even he couldn't dig them out. One evening, as the snow fell thick outside, Clara found him sitting by the window, staring at nothing. The firelight traced the lines of his face, the strength in his hands. For the first time, she dared to speak. "Why did you take me in?" she asked softly. He didn't turn at first. Then, after a long silence, he said, "Because I know what it's like to lose everything you thought you were worth." Those words stayed with her. She wanted to ask more about his wife, about the sadness in his voice, but something told her not to. Some wounds were too deep to touch. That night, Clara dreamed of her mother's voice. It was faint, like wind through broken glass. "Find your worth again, my child," it said. "Not through others, but through what you can give." When she woke, tears were on her cheeks, but for the first time, her heart didn't feel empty. Spring began to whisper through the woods. The snow melted, The river near the cabin thawed, and wildflowers began to bloom at forgotten memories. Clara noticed the change in Eli too. He smiled a little more. The children laughed louder. She wasn't strong, not like him, but he told her, strength ain't just in your arms, it's in getting up again after you've been broken. One afternoon, as they worked together outside, a group of men from the nearby town came riding by. Their laughter turned sharp when they saw her. Ain't that the barren girl from Maple Creek? One of them sneered. Didn't her own folks sell her off? The words cut through her like a blade. She froze. The axe slipped from her hand. Eli stepped forward, his voice like thunder. You best keep riding, he warned. The men laughed but left, the echo of their mockery hanging in the air long after they'd gone. Clara turned away, ashamed. Eli came closer, his tone softer now. Don't listen to 'em, he said. You ain't what they say you are. She looked up at him, eyes trembling. Then what am I? He paused, his gaze holding hers. Someone who's still here. The silence that had once been heavy now felt gentle. The days that followed grew warmer, not because of the weather, but because hope had quietly taken root inside that cabin. Clara began humming while she cooked. The children joined in. Eli would watch from his chair, a faint smile on his lips, as if the sound reminded him that life hadn't ended after all. And yet, deep down, Clara feared the truth that the world outside still saw her as broken, useless, bought and sold like a possession. But Eli never treated her that way. He didn't pity her. He didn't try to fix her. He simply gave her space to be. And that, more than anything, began to heal her. One evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the forest gold, Clara stood outside, looking at the horizon. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about what could be built from the ruins. Inside, Eli called her name softly. Supper's ready. She turned toward the cabin, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she smiled genuinely, freely, like someone who'd begun to find herself again. But deep within the trees, a shadow watched the past, unwilling to let go so easily. Spring had barely settled over the pines when the peace around the Turner cabin began to tremble. The days were warmer now. Clara hung washed clothes near the creek, while the children played with sticks and laughter danced in the air. But beneath all that warmth, Eli had noticed it too, to deliberate, and always turning back before reaching the cabin. Clara didn't know about it yet. She'd begun to smile again. Her laughter had become a melody that even the forest seemed to echo. Every evening she'd hum while stirring stew, and Eli, pretending not to notice, would find himself watching her reflection in the pot lid. He found Clara sitting on the porch, braiding Lily's hair. Kind, alive. You look tired, she said, rising as he approached. Just a long day, he replied. His voice was quiet, but there was something behind it, tension. A thought left unspoken. Before she could ask, a sound of hooves broke the calm. A wagon appeared on the trail, and the laughter that came with it froze Clara in place. The wagon stopped, dust rising around it. He climbed down, his clothes cleaner than she remembered, his face older but just as cold. Beside him stood another man, young, sharply dressed, with the kind of smirk that made your skin crawl. Well, her father sneered. Didn't think I'd find you living like a queen after running off. Clara's heart pounded. What are you doing here? She whispered. I came for what's mine, he said, his tone casual, cruelly calm. The money this lumberjack gave me was for a wife, not a servant. And this here, he motioned to the younger man, is Mr. Carver. He's willing to make a better offer. Eli stepped forward then, his shadow falling across the porch. She ain't yours, he said firmly. You sold her, remember. Her father laughed. Sold? I call it a loan. I figured she'd come crawling back when she realized she couldn't give you what a real woman should. The insult hit like a whip. Clara flinched, her eyes burning. Eli's jaw tightened. For a moment, the forest itself seemed to go silent. The children, watching from the window, pressed closer together. Eli took a slow step forward, his voice low and dangerous. You best leave now. But her father only grinned. Not without her. Or my money back. There was no mistaking the tone. It wasn't just greed, it was control, a man's twisted need to keep his daughter chained to shame. Clara's hands trembled. All the pain she thought she'd buried came roaring back. She saw that day again, her father's hand clutching. The envelope, her mother's silence, her own tears. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Go home. There's nothing left for you here." He stepped closer, sneering. "Home? You are my home, girl. You owe me your life." Eli moved before the words had even finished. He stood between them now, his height and strength like a wall. "She don't owe you a damn thing," he growled. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air crackled with tension. Then, her father spat at the ground. "Fine," he hissed, "but mark my words, a man like you don't deserve her. You'll see, she ruin you too." He climbed back onto the wagon, muttering curses. The younger man smirked as he followed. As the wagon rolled away, Clara felt her knees weaken. Eli caught her before she fell. For the first time, she didn't hide her tears. "Why won't they let me live?" she whispered. Eli's arms tightened around her. "Because they don't understand what living means," he said quietly. That night, the cabin was heavy with silence. Eli poured himself a cup of coffee, but didn't drink it. He just stood there, watching her. "You shouldn't have to see him again," he finally said. "I thought I was free," she murmured. "But no matter how far I go, his voice follows." Eli came closer, kneeling beside her chair. "Listen to me," he said gently. "You ain't what he said. You ain't what anyone said. You're more than what's been done to you." She looked at him, eyes shining with tears. "Why do you care so much?" He hesitated. "Because once, someone cared for me when I didn't deserve it. My wife, before she passed, she used to say, 'You can't bury pain in wood or work. You gotta give it a reason to change.' Maybe you're that reason for me now." Clara didn't know what to say. For a long time, she'd thought she had nothing left to give. Not love, not family, not purpose. Days passed, but the shadow of her father's visit lingered. The children noticed Clara's quietness. Lily tried to cheer her up by braiding flowers into her hair. It worked, a little, yet Eli could see the weight still pressing on her. He began taking her with him to the forest, showing her how to mark trees, how to listen to the wind for direction. The work grounded her. 4 hours, they said little, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. One evening, as they returned, they found the cabin door open. Eli's rifle was missing from the wall. Panic surged through him. Then a voice came from inside. "Well, look what the woods dragged in," her father said. Stepping into the doorway, gun in hand, Clara froze. Eli's body went rigid. "Put that down," he warned. "Not till I get what's mine," her father snapped. His voice cracked, the sound of a man torn between greed and guilt. "You think you can steal her from me, from her blood? She ain't your blood anymore," Eli said firmly, stepping forward. For a moment, time stopped. The children huddled near the stairs, eyes wide. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Then, something inside her snapped. "Enough," she cried, stepping between them. Her voice echoed off the cabin walls. "You sold me. You gave me away like I was a burden. But I survived. I found a life. These children, they call me Ma now. You don't get to take that away." Her father's hand trembled. The gun lowered slightly. His eyes softened, just for a breath, before hardening again. "You think this life will forgive you? You'll always be barren, always worthless." Before Eli could move, Clara slapped her father across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like a whip. "Then I'll be barren," she said, voice steady. "But I'll never be yours again." He stared at her, shocked, then turned and stumbled out the door, the gun clattering to the floor behind him. Clara stood there trembling, the night air biting her skin. Eli wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "It's over," he said softly. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't, not yet, because somewhere in the woods, her father's voice still echoed, and with it, the promise of one last reckoning. The forest had gone quiet since that night. Even the birds seemed to sense the shadow that still lingered among the trees. Eli and Clara tried to return to normal life, but the echo of that confrontation had truly faded. Clara couldn't shake the image of her father standing there with the gun, his eyes hollow, his words cruel, his soul rotted by bitterness. Eli tried to protect her from the weight of it, but even he felt the dread creeping through the woods each time the wind whispered through the branches. Weeks passed. The snow melted, leaving the ground soft and green. Clara planted wildflowers near the cabin, hoping to bring color back into their days. She smiled for the children, sang with Lily while washing clothes, and helped Sam fix the old rocking chair. Yet at night, she'd sit by the window, her eyes searching the dark woods as if she expected someone, or something, to appear. "You're waiting on him," he said quietly. She nodded without turning. "He won't stop, Eli. I know him. He'll come back when we least expect it." Eli sighed and stepped closer, his hand brushing her shoulder. "Then he'll find me waiting," he said, his voice steady, protective. Clara turned to face him, her eyes soft but tired. "I don't want more blood on my soul," she whispered. "He's still my father, even after everything." Eli looked at her for a long moment. Their eyes met. A silence passed between them, heavy and filled with something unspoken. For weeks they'd been circling around a truth neither dared to name. But now, in that quiet, it seemed to settle between them. Not lust, not pity, something deeper, something like love. That night, a storm rolled over the pines. The wind howled, shaking the shutters, rain slamming against the roof. The children huddled by the fire while Eli checked the door locks and loaded his rifle. Clara moved between rooms, comforting Lily, soothing Jacob, but as the thunder cracked, she felt it, a chill, different from the storm. Something was wrong. Eli noticed it too. He stepped to the window and froze. Through the flashes of lightning, he saw movement at the edge of the clearing. A figure, soaked, wild-eyed, stumbling toward the cabin. Her father. "Stay inside," Eli ordered, grabbing his rifle. Clara's voice trembled. "Eli, please, don't." But he was already at the door. Clara followed to the threshold, her heart hammering. "Clara," he croaked. His voice was weaker now, more human than she'd ever heard it. They took everything." "What are you talking about?" Eli demanded. Her father swayed, clutching his side. "Carver, that man from town. He said he'd help me get her back, but he robbed me instead, left me to die out there." His voice broke into a cough. "I came to make it right." Clara stepped forward, tears mixing with the rain. "You don't have to." He raised a shaking hand. "No, listen. I was wrong. I was wrong to sell you. Wrong to hate you for something you couldn't change. Your mother. She begged me to stop, but I couldn't see past my own shame." His voice cracked again. "I thought you were my curse, but you were the only good thing I ever had." Clara froze. The words she'd wanted to hear all her life, the apology she thought would never come, hung between them like smoke. Eli lowered the rifle slightly, but didn't move. The rain poured harder, thunder rolling like a warning. Then, from the trees behind, another voice called out, "There he is." 2 men stepped into the clearing, rough, armed, and angry. Carver was one of them, the same smirking man from before. "Told you he'd come crawling back here," Carver sneered. "Now, how about you hand over the rest of that lumber money, Turner, and we'll be on our way." Eli raised the rifle again. "You ain't talking a damn thing." Carver laughed. "You think you can shoot your way out of this? There's 2 of us, and you've got a woman and kids inside." The standoff hung heavy. Lightning flashed again, white light slicing through the darkness, and in that split second, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then a gunshot cracked. Clara screamed, but before Eli could reload, the second man fired back. The bullet grazed Eli's arm, spinning him backward. "Eli!" Clara cried, rushing forward. Her father, weak but desperate, lunged toward Carver. "Leave them!" he shouted. Carver struck him hard, but the old man didn't stop. He grabbed Carver's coat, pulling him down into the mud. Clara screamed again as her father collapsed, blood darkening the rain-soaked earth. Carver fled into the woods, clutching his bleeding shoulder, vanishing into the storm. "Pa," Clara whispered, falling beside him. Her father looked up at her, his breath shallow. eyes full of something she'd never seen before. "I'm sorry, girl," he rasped. You turned out better than I ever deserved." She held his hand, sobbing. "It's all right, Pa, it's all right." A faint smile crossed his cracked lips. You got a family now. Don't waste it." And then, with the softest exhale, he was gone. For a long time, neither Clara nor Eli moved. Eli touched her shoulder gently. "He's gone, Clara," he said softly. She nodded, tears falling freely. "He came back, just to set it right." Eli looked down at the lifeless man. Then maybe he finally did something right. Together they buried him near the edge of the forest, where the pines whispered like prayers. Clara, as she stood there, soaked, weary, but somehow lighter, she whispered, "Rest. Pa, you're free now." Eli stood beside her, silent. The children watched from the porch, their faces solemn. When Clara turned, Eli's eyes met hers, steady, warm, and filled with something unspoken yet undeniable. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Clara's head rested against Eli's shoulder. His injured arm was bandaged, his hand resting gently over hers. "He died trying to protect us," she said quietly. Eli nodded. "And you forgave him anyway?" She looked into the fire. "Forgiving ain't easy, but hating him, that's what kept me from living. Maybe it's time I start." Eli smiled faintly. "You already did." The crackle of the fire filled the silence. The world outside had gone still, but inside that little cabin, something new had begun to take root, not born of pity, but of shared pain and quiet strength. Clara looked up at him. He turned to her, his voice rough but honest. "I didn't buy you, Clara. I bought my second chance." Her breath caught, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time, she didn't look away. Outside, dawn began to rise over the pines. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings, and for the first time in her life, Clara knew she wasn't someone's burden anymore. She was someone's peace. The dawn after the storm was unlike any Clara had ever seen. The forest glistened under a silver mist, and the pines swayed softly as if whispering prayers for the dead. The ground was still wet with rain, but the world felt calm, quiet in a way that only follows chaos. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, its soft glow washing the walls in shades of amber. Eli sat by the window, arm in a sling, watching the first golden streaks of sunlight reach through the trees. He hadn't slept. He didn't need to. Something deeper than rest had settled in him, a sense that life, for all its cruelty, had given him a chance to start over. The lines of exhaustion were still there, but her eyes, for the first time, held no fear, only understanding. She handed Eli a cup of coffee, warm and strong. "You should rest," she said softly. He looked up at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You say that to the kids more than you say it to me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe because you listen less than they do." For a while, they just sat there, listening to the forest wake up. Birds began to sing again, and somewhere down the valley, a stream rushed over stones, clear and alive. Clara's gaze drifted toward the small mound near the trees, her father's grave. The wind brushed through the wildflowers she placed there, making them dance gently. She didn't cry this time. The pain was still there, yes, but it no longer hollowed her out. Eli followed her gaze. "You think he found peace?" he asked quietly. She nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I think he gave me mine first." He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Strange thing, ain't it? How forgiveness can feel heavier than hate." Clara looked at him then, her eyes soft and shimmering. "Forgiveness ain't for the dead," she said. "It's for the ones still breathin'." The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of all the things they didn't need to say. By noon, the children were awake. "For you, Ma," she said proudly, placing it on Clara's head. But today, it struck different. It didn't ache anymore. It healed. She bent down and hugged the little girl tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. Eli watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his eyes glimmering. The sight of Clara laughing with the children, sunlight in her hair, was something he never thought he'd see again. Life, blooming right in the heart of his grief. Later that afternoon, he hitched the wagon and told Clara, We should head into town, get some supplies, maybe a new window pane for the kitchen. She hesitated. After everything that happened, you think it's safe? He gave a small shrug. Storm's over. Ain't no sense in hiding from ghosts. As they rode into town, the air felt different. The same townsfolk who once whispered behind Clara's back now looked on in quiet awe. Some even nodded politely. Word of what happened had spread. How Eli Turner, the quiet lumberjack, had stood his ground. At the general store, old Mrs. Boone leaned across the counter. Heard about your pa, dear, she said softly. You did right by him. And by yourself. Clara smiled weakly. Thank you. Eli handed her a small paper bag, a bar of soap, a ribbon, a few things she'd mentioned weeks ago, but never bought for herself. You deserve something nice, he said simply. She blinked, surprised. You remembered. He grinned slightly. I ain't that old yet. The ride home was calm. The children sang softly in the back of the wagon. Clara looked out across the forest, her heart both heavy and light. For the first time, she didn't see herself as the girl who'd been sold, or the woman who couldn't give birth. She saw herself as something else entirely, someone who had learned to grow again after being cut down. When they reached the cabin, evening had begun to fall. The sky blazed with orange and violet, the air filled with the scent of pine and earth. Eli helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering in hers, just a moment longer than necessary. Neither pulled away. Thank you, she said softly. For what? He asked. For giving me a place where I could learn to live again. He looked at her, really looked, his eyes deep and steady. You didn't just learn, Clara. You taught me, too. You brought this place back to life. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward. Then, from the porch, little Lily called out, Pa, Ma, supper's getting cold. Eli smiled, shaking his head. Guess that's our call. Clara laughed softly, following him inside. The cabin glowed with firelight, the table set, the smell of stew filling the air. As the children talked and giggled, she looked around, at their faces, at Eli's quiet smile, and felt something she hadn't felt since childhood, belonging. She whispered into the night, Thank you for letting me go, Pa. I'll carry your piece with me. Behind her, Eli's voice came softly. You talking to the stars again? She turned, smiling. Maybe they listen better than most. He walked closer, standing beside her. The night air was cool, the forest calm. You know, he said quietly, I used to think I'd never love again. Thought my heart died with her. Clara looked at him, the moonlight tracing the scars on his face. And now? She asked gently. He met her eyes. Now I think I was just waiting for you. Her breath caught, not out of surprise, but out of something deeper. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached for his hand, and he took it, rough palm to soft fingers, fitting together like they were always meant to. The forest around them hummed with life. The cabin glowed softly behind, the sound of children's laughter drifting faintly through the window. And in that quiet corner of the world, to broken souls, one who had lost love, one who had never known it, finally found home, not in the house, not in the land, but in each other.